Okay, let's discuss another class of organic compounds. Now we'll do the lipids. Okay, so your lipids come in four basic forms. So your lipids class. Okay, lipids can come in the form of fatty acids, triglycerides, phospholipids, steroids, and the fifth form we call eicosanoids that we'll not discuss. Okay, so we'll look at these four: fatty acids, triglycerides, phospholipids, and steroids. Let's begin with fatty acids. So fatty acids structurally are basically long chains of carbon. Carbon, 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 carbon. And the carbons are usually surrounded by H's. So we call it a hydrocarbon chain. H, 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 H. Okay. And at the end of the chain, the last carbon at one end will be in a carboxyl group, like so. And at the other end, you have what's called, this part is called a methyl group, a CH3, methyl group. So that is the characteristic of a fatty acid. Long chains of carbons can be about 4 to 24 carbons in a chain, and linked together by usually single bonds, and they are surrounded by H's. It's a fatty acids. So your fatty acids can be what's called saturated. So in a fatty acid, if you have all single bonds like this in the chain, this is called a saturated fatty acid. And it's saturated because all of the carbons are surrounded by H's. So it's said to be saturated by H's. So it's called a saturated fat. Okay, other than all single bonds in the carbon chain. Sometimes you may have a double bond, for example. Okay, and in that case, then the carbons in the double bond will have one less hydrogen. Okay, so in this case here, put H here, nothing up here, and so because all the carbons are not saturated by H's, this is called an unsaturated fatty acid. So this is an unsaturated fatty acid. Okay. And sometimes you can have two bonds in there. So you may have two double bonds. Okay, put one right here, for example. Okay. Like that. Okay. And yeah. So if you have one double bond, it's mono unsat fat. Okay, that's one double bond. If you have more than one, we call it poly unsat. That's greater than one double bond. Okay, so this would be a poly unsat fat because you have at least two double bonds in the chain. Okay, so that's fatty acid. Now your fatty acids can be, some of them are called essential fatty acids. And your essential fatty acids must be obtained from your diet. The body cannot make them. And so you have to be quite careful sometimes when you go on special diets to make sure that you still bring in the fatty acids. So you need fatty acids to build your phospholipids, for example, to build your triglycerides. You need fatty acids. They're really the building blocks for other fats, so you need them. Okay. Let's next look at the next fat or next lipid. Call that triglyceride. Okay, so triglycerides is next. So triglycerides are formed between glycerol. This is glycerol. H, OH. That's glycerol. Okay, so glycerol will react with 3 fatty acids. So you're gonna have a fatty acid here. C. Another one here. Another one here. Right, fatty acid. So we have 3 fatty acids. Here again, you're going to use dehydration synthesis to pull off a water and to then form a bond. Okay, pull the water out, form a bond, and you get something like this. So when a glycerol combines with 3 fatty acids, you get this structure at the end. Here's a glycerol backbone, now it's attached to this O here, and then along with this and then C's. Okay, so that's your triglyceride. Glyceride. A glycerol plus 3 fatty acids. The triglycerides play different roles in the body. But first, let's see. Triglycerides, let's give you something here. It takes on different forms. So this is basically your cooking oil. When you cook food with oil, you're using triglycerides. So triglycerides are called oils if they are liquid at room temperature, okay? Or they're called fats if they're solids at room temperature. Usually the fats come from animals, right? While the oils come from plants. So you have things like corn oil, soybean oil, whatever else. It's typically a plant oil that you have because those tend to stay in a liquid form, while the animal-based fats or triglycerides turn solid mass at room temperature. Okay, so the thing you cook with, your veg oil, your olive oil, those are all forms of triglycerides that you use for cooking. Okay, triglycerides also are how we store fat. So functions of triglycerides includes, this is how we store, to the fat you have here or wherever it is, that fat is basically triglycerides being housed in adipocyte cells. It's good for cushion, right? And thermal insulation. It's what keeps us warm. So it's quite an important thing to have. It can't be completely fatless. Not a good thing. Okay. Now, a little bit more on the fat. So let's look in some detail a little bit on the fatty acid part of it. So again, if you have this is your cholesterol, this is your visceral attached to the fatty acid. Let's just look at one, for example. You have 3 of them. So in the fatty acid chain, again, you may have double bonds, okay? And if you have a double bond, then that becomes an unsaturated triglyceride, called unsat fat. And sometimes in the double bond, the H's can be on the same side. Okay? If they're on the same side, this is called a cis fat. Cis means same side. Sometimes, however, the double bond, the H's may be on opposite sides like this. That's called a trans fat. So cis fat, the H's on the same side. Trans fat, they're arranged diagonally across each other. Okay, and cis fat is healthy. Right, this was natural in nature. Trans fat is usually done, created artificially, so it's not good. Sorry, let me check it off. Trans fat is bad for you. It tends to stick to your arterial walls and promote plaque formation in your blood vessels. So if you can avoid trans fat, it's a good idea. Cis is okay. In fact, even cis fat can be bad for you, in the long run as well. So that's cis and trans fat. And then we have some specs. Okay, all right. Then we have, well, let's pause here.